Monday to you, YouTube. Hope everything's going well for you. I'm just hopping on here right quick to share a story that I just had happen while I was fueling. So I'm in Northern Illinois right now, starting my week on a fresh clock after a fortunate pass-through reset through home, which was nice. But I'm now reloaded after finishing off the last load from last week. That brought me home in the first place. And so I swing through a truck stop not too far from the shipper, get fueled up, get my scale ticket, make sure my weights are right. Because I'm not ashamed to admit it that I am not someone who can quickly do metric conversions in my head, and my BOL had the weight of my freight in kilograms. So I'm naturally going to assume, okay, double that value, you'll be somewhere in the ballpark of accurate. But at the same time, you don't know where your weights are at until you actually get on a scale and you can get the official ticket and figure out what's what and where's where. So I figured, you know what, I could be heavy in the front, just be in the same. So let's go ahead and get a full load of fuel in the tanks, top off my def, and then hit the scale. All right, sound thinking. So I'm in the fuel island. A couple islands over. The island next to me was disabled, so there's no truck there. After that one, there was a gentleman for a mega carrier in there. I won't say who or what, just in case someone gets their hitch in a bind over it. Anyway, this gentleman, he's starting to fuel, and there's another gentleman with him talking. He's carrying a fuel canister, which I think is kind of strange, but I'm not thinking too much of it. Whatever, folks are doing what they're doing. And the gentleman with the fuel canister is smoking a cigarette by the fuel island while two trucks are fueling. All right, red flag number one. Now, for those of you who might not be aware of the situation, which I'm sure is basically none of you, I'm pretty sure all of you are at least aware of this. Fuel vapors tend to be combustible. Now, I'm not sure how combustible diesel vapor is by comparison to normal gasoline vapor, but either way, it's still a flammable material, and you don't want to have things that are ignited in close proximity to it, because, well, that could be a major problem in a major hurry if things go awry. Anyway, so this gentleman was talking to the driver while he's smoking his cigarette and carrying his fuel canister. Okay. I couldn't help but notice it while I'm getting my fueling set up. So he apparently stops talking to this other gentleman and walks over to me. Very politely asks me how I'm doing. We exchange pleasantries, and then he says, hey, can you give me a ride to my car? I ran out of fuel. This is the gas I'm going to put in it. I'm just up the road here. If you're going my way, I'd appreciate the assistance. My response was, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Policy is that I'm not allowed to take on passengers, which is accurate. That is a completely factual statement, because the carrier I am leased on with has a policy that I am not allowed to pick up passengers unless it is an emergency situation and there is a perfectly valid reason for me to take on passengers in said emergency situation. This gentleman, being out of fuel and his car on the side of the road not too far away, does not qualify as an emergency situation. Therefore, it does not fall under the purview of that clause of providing assistance to another motorist or pedestrian in said emergency situation. So I am therefore in the right and politely declining to assist this gentleman in his need for a ride. Now, in fairness, when things get tough and stuff happens, asking for help can be difficult. But the biggest problem I had with his approach is that he was smoking his cigarette while two semi-trucks were dispensing vast quantities of diesel fuel. He flicks his ashes the right way, something goes wrong at just the right capacity, and all of a sudden we have at least one truck and the fuel island possibly on fire. That's not good. That was what you would call a very, very poor start to the week. And that's putting it mildly. even if I were allowed to take on passengers, there was no insurance clause under my leasing agreement. There was no emergency situations only clause in my leasing agreement. Or if I was just my own operating authority and operating completely on my own judgment, I still would not have accepted this gentleman's request for assistance, or I would not have heeded it, because he was not being intelligent by smoking a bleeding cigarette by a fuel island while 2 semi-trucks are dispensing fuel into 4 different tanks. I mean, that's just common sense as far as I'm concerned. You don't have a flaming thing. I don't care how small it is. It could be a slow match for fireworks. You could be flicking your bic nervously because you're just having that kind of a day. I don't care. If you have a burning thing by a fuel island while fuel is actively being dispensed, I am not your friend, because you are putting me in potentially mortal peril. So, sorry, Chief, no help for you, even if I could. But I could not, as I explained earlier. So, there's my catch-all saving grace. Now, in his defense, he was polite, even if he was stupid, but he was polite. And in another situation, I might have helped him out. Maybe. But, it is what it is. So, word to the wise, if you were to run out of fuel and you walk into a truck stop and there are semi-trucks dispensing fuel, it is not going to endear you to any of those drivers if you are smoking a cigarette by their open gas tanks. I'm sorry, the fuel tanks. It's not gasoline in these trucks, it's diesel. You will not endear yourselves to any of them by smoking by open diesel fuel tanks while diesel fuel is actively being dispensed. Now, you would think, what's the big deal? Surely there's no real peril from this. Well, that's where you're wrong, because if you're not someone who's ever dispensed diesel fuel into a diesel fuel tank, let me set the situation up for you. Unlike a regular gasoline vehicle where the nozzle will fit snugly into the aperture for your fuel, diesel fuel tanks are basically like a 3.5 to 4 inch diameter circle that's covered by a large cap that screws down. So it's a gaping void, just exposing essentially the entire contents, however much there may be, of the diesel fuel tank to the open air. Whereas with regular gas pumps, you've got that little rubber ring, and it's going to help kind of keep splashing and spillage controlled and contained and keep it against the vehicle. And if there's any kind of overflow, it's going to run down into the overflow drain port at the bottom of your gas cap. There's a designed implement there to help mitigate gasoline splashing back on you if you accidentally overfill your vehicle. Now, when you're fueling diesel trucks, if you look at diesel fuel tanks, you will notice that there's always dirt and gunk and grime on our fuel tanks, whether they're side fill tanks or rear fill tanks, because diesel fuel there's a quasi filter apparatus, a large debris filter apparatus that's right inside the tank, and attached to that is the chain for the fill cap. So it screws down, there's a chain inside that keeps it attached to this filter that rests inside that. So that's how the whole thing works. But because the fuel nozzles are basically resting on the tank fill rims, there's a lot of diesel fuel that splishes and splashes and splatters and droplets. It's like, you've ever poured water from a high altitude and watched it splatter all over your countertop? If you're a gentleman and you've ever peed into a urinal or a toilet standing up because you didn't want to take a knee, or you stood too far back and you saw splatters every which way, same principle, just with highly combustible liquid, fuel. So that's why apparatuses, however you want to, whatever term is actually correct there, as a regular gasoline vehicle. Gasoline vehicles also like to operate in a quasi-vacuum or self-sealing situation, I think. Whereas your check engine light will actually come on if your gas cap is not properly snugged down tight after you fuel, and you just gotta, turn your engine off, take off your gas cap, reseat it, and then your engine will, oh yes, everything is fine now, and off you go. Diesel engines are not like that, because the pressure element of the whole process actually occurs inside the cylinder itself, where there's no spark to set off the diesel fuel and cause combustion. It is pressure-based combustion, which is how we get so much torque out of these monstrous engines. For similar horsepower to a normal, V6 or V8 or V10 motor, you'd put gasoline in. So yeah, poor Grifter needed to get to his car. I didn't help him out. A, because he was smoking, and B, because I'm not allowed to pick up passengers. So yeah, safety first, folks. Safety first. Anyway, that's all I got for you folks today. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you down the road.